peace to you people at YouTube. This is Yusuf on my channel, and I want to address something because it just gets stranger and stranger. I had called blood bought Jerry Sellers on Skype, and very aggressive, always wanting to tell me, very, very aggressive, who was very proud of his aggression, who would read things that didn't exist. He actually quoted something that I had written, not to him, but to I am a free will offering. This was something I wrote to him. I said, heresy is deadly. The heretics must be fought against. And because it was in a comment on the Creflo Dollar, a video that was criticizing Creflo Dollar, he demanded that it was about Creflo Dollar when it was in the plural. Now, I had asked him, one of the only questions I got in, because I said, have you ever read the Church Fathers? And he said, a little of them, but I didn't like them, because I said, no, that's fine, alright, cool. Do you know when and how the Bible was compiled? The New Testament was compiled. Well, don't you want to hear why I don't like them? I said, no, that's fine, I didn't ask you that, I just asked you if you had read them or not. And he took this as great offense. As if I should start bickering about the Church Fathers. Well, if you buy a book or you go on early Christian writings, the Church Fathers will include Origen and Tacitus, who are heretics, who us as the Orthodox don't call them Church Fathers. But among the portrayal of this, it's called, they're grouped in as Church Fathers. Both of them bear considerable witness to the early church, but they had some screwy ideas. Tertullian was a great defender of Christianity until he became a Montanist, and Origen had emasculated himself. Some people try to contest it and say, oh, well, I don't think he did or whatever, but that's the that he wrote, that he misread either Matthew or Mark, where it says, if your eye offendeth you, pluck it out, or the eunuch, some men are born eunuchs, some men are make themselves eunuchs, when he's talking about marriage. So he castrated himself. He also had belief in reincarnation and universal salvation. Some strange ideas. Well, the Church Fathers go from fragments of things like Papias to letters like Ignatius of Antioch. Some of the letters of Ignatius of Antioch aren't valid. They're not actually from Antioch. They're not written by him. I think we could show this very easily. I think most people agree with me that at the most there are 7 authentic letters and that there are 3 that are absolutely written by Ignatius of Antioch, who was taught by John. Polycarp, who I've read also, was taught by John. Then we have people like Justin Martyr, who wrote so much that some of his stuff is lost. Irenaeus of Lyon. There's people like Hippolytus, Clement of Rome, the Epistle of Barnabas, the Didache, and this is just a fraction of it that I've read. If you went online and you said, I'm going to read the Gospels, what Gospels would be there? The Gospels. Well, you would have, obviously, the 4 canonical Gospels. You would also have the Gnostic Gospels and the heretical Gospels. A very good thing to read. I've read these. I've read the Shepherd of Hermes. I think the only one of the pre-Nicene writers that I haven't read is the Clementine Homilies, also called the Pseudo-Clementine Homilies, and the Clementine Recognitions. Now, these are basically 2 forms of the same work that are disputed. Many people, they say, well, which one was the correct one? Many people, I've ran into people who said, no, the Clementine Recognitions are actually what Clement actually wrote, and First Clement wasn't. And you'll hear an obscure reference by Papias saying that Judas Iscariot got crushed by chariots. Now, I think I'm going to send this to I Am a Free Will Offering. Why is it so important to read the Church Fathers? Because you have a direct line back to the apostles. The people, Irenaeus of Lyon, who's arguing again, who's defending the Christian church, what got called Catholic by Ignatius of Antioch. He's the first one to use that term. Why did he say it was Catholic? It was the universal church. It was for everybody, the slave, the free, the Greek, the barbarian, the Jew. And also because it was universally taught by the apostles. The apostles didn't teach in secret, just as Christ didn't teach in secret. Christ has said in the Gospel of John, I have taught nothing to you in secret. Now, Irenaeus of Lyon talks. He actually lists the 4 Gospels that we have in our codicy that we call the New Testament. He argued against the Gnostics and showed their belief. He was arguing against Gnosticism. Basically the Valentinians and the Basilidians. But he also touches on, he's also refuting Marcionism while he's doing this, because he's affirming that Christ came in the flesh. Why is it so important to read the entirety of Christian work? Of all these people who are bearing witness to this, and to there are people who are persecuting them, like Tacitus and Pliny and Celsus. Because how do you know, if you're a Protestant, how do you know that that New Testament that you have, that Western codex of the New Testament that you have, that all those books should be there? Certainly Martin Luther didn't think they should all be there. But I think this touches on an important topic, is that it has become an idol. Now, the codicy of the New Testament that we have, which the first appearance of all those books being there, of what was used as the Western canon, was given by Athanasius of Alexandria, who was the champion of Nicaea that said Christ is one with God. Homoousia, not homoousia. It can be said homoousion or homoousios, depending on how you're saying it. When were those Gospels written? When were those epistles written? Who wrote those epistles? At what time did they write these things? Why is it that we see in the first epistle of John, it was written by a guy named John? Or was it attributed to John because it was the school of teaching that John set up in Greece? And they attribute it because that's what people would do, because they didn't want to, basically, they got taught by this great apostle. They were taught by John with the same flow of everything, same kind of logic and everything. So if they would have put their own name down, that was a type of theft. You said, this is John, this is the ideas of John that we're passing down. This is an epistle of John. And these things are called the Catholic epistles, even by the Protestants. Why? Because they're addressing everybody. They're encyclicals. Now, I am not a Roman Catholic. I'm not underneath the Pope of Rome. But I am in no way a Protestant, because many Protestants will say, oh, everything with John's name on it was written by John, even though the Apocalypse in the East, it was said by the churches, well, we don't read that in church. That's not something to be read in church. Why? Because we've never done it before. We've never seen this thing. But apparently it's coming from Patmos. Why don't we know about this? Is this something coming from Rome? This may shock people greatly. But to hold the Bible up and say this is the absolute Word of God is to contradict the Gospel of John. The Word of God is Christ. Now, I could argue, because he said your comprehension of reading is poor. Well, it wasn't. He wasn't so polite to say poor, and he based this on 3 sentences. Even though I implore any of my viewers, is my reading comprehension less than far above average? This is not pride, this is fact. I'm not bragging, this is just fact. Who of you Protestants who might see this has read all of the Church Fathers except the Clementine recognitions / Clementine homilies? How do you know that those books of your canon should be in there, when to this day in the East they won't read the Apocalypse of John Church? They say, that's fine, that's a good book, it's a great book. It's a book of signs and symbols that it says this, but we've never seen this thing before. And even when they finally talked about this canon, or these books that were in there, because there was no idea of canon until pretty much very late. That we don't read it. Well, why don't you read it in church? Well, because you see, we've never heard of this. We don't know anybody who's ever heard of this thing. Yeah, this is fine. It doesn't say anything heretical in there. This is good. This is good Christian literature. It affirms Christ as God. The problem is why didn't anybody in the East see this thing for 300 years? Now, again, I could be exaggerating and saying false things, although I think everything in Scripture is good and useful for the church. I believe that they were inspired writings, even the Apocalypse of John. But who is it, this man, this Jerry Sellers, who, when he comes across somebody who he disagrees with, and I'm going to ask this to you, Well, I'll do this in the second part. I'll put this as I'll put part 2. But if Origen and Tertullian, oh my gosh, I've read the Church Fathers, and I don't like them because them, a group of people who didn't necessarily agree with each other, and if you're reading the Church Fathers from Western writings, they have heretics in there. They have heretics in there. Tertullian and Origen. The funny thing is that these are people that sometimes argued against each other. But we do see a chain of teaching, of basically an apostolic teaching line, a line of succession, going from Polycarp and Ignatius of Antioch, and in Rome we see Clement, who was said by even people around him that he still had the voices of Peter and Paul in his ears. He was an overseer in Rome, a bishop in Rome. He's mentioned in Paul's letters. Ignatius of Antioch and Polycarp were taught by the Apostle John. Clement was taught by Peter and Paul. Then you have Justin Martyr. Then you have Irenaeus of Lyon. And it's him that raises up the 4 Gospels and says these are reliable. So without this line, we might not have. Without the teaching of the apostles living in these people, that is teaching Christianity and preserving it and fighting for it, arguing for it, and dying for it. Because you had Marcionites, you had Gnostics, you had Manichaeans, you'd have the Novatians, the Donatists, the Arians, the Nestorians, Monophysites, and even before that you had Sabellianism, the Modalists. But it was the people called the Catholic because that held this, which was a way to differentiate themselves from the Gnostics and the other heretics, the Ebionites and these people. So I've read a little bit of the Church Fathers and I don't like them. A little bit. If you collected the Church Fathers into a set of books, does anybody know how far that would stretch? Has anybody ever seen the complete works of the Church Fathers, of what the West calls the Church Fathers, including Tertullian and Origen? Is there a Protestant that can answer me that out there? How many times greater is it than the Bible? And this is the people bearing witness, whether you agree with them or not. They bear a considerable witness to the early church. Why wouldn't you agree with the Epistle of Barnabas, the Didache, or Ignatius of Antioch? The letter to the Epistle to the Philadelphians, and the letter to the Smyrnians. Where's the heresy in those? Doesn't this sound like somebody who was taught by the apostles? This man was writing by the skeptics, say, between 100 and 120. I think he was writing earlier than that. But you also have to ask yourself the dating on this. Why do you believe the dates on these things? And if you don't like the Church Fathers, then why are you using the canon of the Roman Papal Catholic Church, a canon that was established after Nicaea in Constantinople, a canon by people who prayed to Mary, a canon established by people who were reading the Church Fathers to find out which books belong in what would be called the New Testament. That's where they got the validity of, to say, oh, we know these books are right because we see Christians talking about them all through from the time of the apostles up. And we can't really say the time of the apostles, but the people who were taught by the apostles had these books. The first people known as Church Fathers, going all the way up until we actually get a list in 367. Which is the only one who actually used that list for reading in church and reading everywhere and this and that. Roman Catholics. In the East, the book of Revelation is not allowed to be read in church. So you don't like the Church Fathers as if you're reading them to be authoritative instead of saying, like, wait, that's why you should, maybe we should read the Apocrypha of the Old Testament so we can know who's Herod. Why did people not like Herod? I can easily answer that for you. Herod was from Idumea. Where is Idumea? It was the Edomites who were forcefully converted to Judaism. The Edomites are the descendants of Esau. Forcefully converted to Judaism under the Maccabees, what was called Hasmoneans. And he was raised as a hostage in Rome. He was raised with the royal house, with the emperors of Rome. So when he came back, he was a Jew. Oh, you have a Jew in charge? That's great. But Herod was actually not Jewish by blood. He wasn't a descendant of David. He was an Edomite, the enemies of the Jews. But you had the Hasmonean period where it brought in this great group. That's why they in the New Testament speaks of proselyte Jews. What is does that mean people just converted to Judaism? Or is it the Edomites that were converted at sword point? Now, I'm wondering if I am a free will offering, can answer any of this stuff to me. But I want to know from you, free will offering, that if I was incorrect in what I said, well, I guess I'll leave that in the next video. That'll be the next video. Peace to you. May God save Serbia and Syria. So, he castrated himself. He also had belief in reincarnation and universal salvation. Some strange ideas. Well, the Church Fathers go from fragments of things like Papias to letters like Ignatius of Antioch. Some of the letters of Ignatius of Antioch are invalid. They're not actually from Antioch. They're not written by him. I think we can show this very easily. I think most people agree with me that at the most there are 7 authentic letters and that there are 3 that are absolutely written by Ignatius of Antioch. He actually quoted something that I had written, not to him, but to I am a free will offering. This was something I wrote to him. I said, heresy is deadly. The heretics must be fought against. And because it was in a comment on the Creflo Dollar, a video that was criticizing Creflo Dollar, he demanded that it was about Creflo Dollar when it was in the plural. Now, I had asked him the portrayal of this. It's called, they're grouped in as church fathers. Both of them bear a considerable witness to the early church, but they had some screwy ideas. Tertullian was a great defender of Christianity until he became a Montanist, and Origen had emasculated himself. Some people try to contest it and say, oh, well, I don't think he did or whatever, but that's the that he wrote that he misread either Matthew or Mark, where it says, if your eye offendeth you, pluck it out, or the eunuch. You know, some men are born eunuchs, some men are make themselves eunuchs. You know, when he's talking about marriage. Peace to you people at YouTube. This is Yusuf on my channel, and I want to address something because it just gets stranger and stranger. I had called blood bought Jerry Sellers on Skype, and very aggressive, always wanting to tell me, I mean, very, very aggressive, who was very proud of his aggression, who would read things that didn't exist. One of the only questions I got in, because I said, have you ever read the Church Fathers? And he said, a little of them, but I didn't like them, because I said, no, that's fine, alright, cool. Do you know when and how the Bible was compiled? The New Testament was compiled. Well, don't you want to hear why I don't like them? I said, no, that's fine, I didn't ask you that, I just asked you if you had read them or not. And he took this as great offense. As if I should start bickering about the Church Fathers. Well, if you buy a book or you go on early Christian writings, the Church Fathers will include Origen and Tacitus, who are heretics, who us as the Orthodox don't call them Church Fathers. But among the